My name's Craig Wakeman and I'm the author of A Journey in Stone. Today, what I want to talk about is some of the topics that are covered within Journey in Stone, just to give you an idea of what it is about, and also a little bit more about what Freemasonry actually is in terms of self-development and personal growth. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to debunk some of the myths of Freemasonry. Many of you will know that these myths are completely rubbish. But it's important for those of you who are not Masons for us to see if we can debunk some myths that you might have heard and then move on from there. Also, we're going to talk about Freemasonry as a tool for self-development, because essentially that's what Freemasonry actually is, only using the language of stones and stone masonry. Also, we're going to talk about what an initiatic tradition actually is. Freemasonry is but one of many initiatic traditions that have existed throughout thousands of years. Then, what we're going to do is we're going to move on and look at some lessons that we can learn from the 3 degrees of craft Freemasonry. We'll then look at how we usually regard concepts of the self and reveal that it's not quite what you think it is. Finally, we'll bring everything together and conclude. So first of all, what I want to talk about are the myths of Freemasonry, and I want to list some of the main ones. Firstly, we are not a religion. Freemasonry has often been called a religion, and that is a mistake. It is not a religion. It does not contain any particular dogmatic religious content whatsoever. The religious content of the material is simply there in order to provide a context and a background for the story that is told through the symbolism and allegory. Another myth is that we're the shadow government, which is complete rubbish. We are not. We are completely apolitical. All we are here for is the development of members and the betterment of the wider world. So what is Freemasonry? Well, let's go on and explore this a little further. Firstly, what I want to say is that you are the artist of your life. It is up to you how you craft it and how you want it to be. We have a limited time on this earth, and so wouldn't it be better if, when you got to the end of this life, you could look back and say, I did everything I wanted to do. I contributed in every way I wanted to, and I lived every day to the fullest and enjoyed every moment. My life was a thing of beauty, which I crafted on purpose. This, amongst many other things, is what Freemasonry can help us do. At the same time, we can learn how we can contribute more to the world around us. All of this leads to a story about a famous statue. This story is about Michelangelo and his statue, the David, currently on show in Florence, in Italy. When he carved this great statue, he took a block of marble which had bothered him through his entire life. He had often visited the garden where this block of stone actually resided, and something bugged him about it. He didn't know what it was, but something was there. He was looking at it with his artist's eye, and he thought that there's something special about that stone. When he was commissioned to create a statue, which had turned out to be the statue of David, he said, okay, I will stipulate what materials I want, and I will do this for you. So he ordered that very block of stone that was bothering him. Then he sat there for 2 weeks looking at this stone, just gazing at it. Eventually, one of the people who had paid him to do this project came up to him and said, you haven't really done anything. We're paying you to create this grand statue, and you haven't done anything at all. I am working, replied Michelangelo. What I'm trying to do is to envision the form within, so that we can chop away the bits to reveal it. And this, for me, is the essence of what Freemasonry actually is. The ability to craft oneself, to reveal the form that is within us. This is why Freemasonry is often called the craft, because we are metaphorically chipping away metaphorical stone with metaphorical tools to reveal our deeper purpose. The big question is then, who are we? Perhaps Freemasonry can help us reveal this. Firstly, what I want to talk about, to give Freemasonry its context, is the initiatic tradition. This is something that has existed for many thousands of years, and Freemasonry is just one example. I've spent many years studying different spiritual systems, and what you can find is that many of them are split up into two separate sections. One of them is the exoteric tradition. That is the more popular version, and when I say popular, the version that everybody knows. This involves the scriptures that everybody knows. It involves going to church. It involves going to the temples. It involves everything that we widely know as any given particular religion that you might choose. Then there is the other tier of the spiritual tradition, which is the esoteric tradition. There is usually one of these in just about every religion you could name. And what this is a core system that actually runs like a thread throughout many of the different traditions. The esoteric tradition is the inner tradition that only a few gifted adherents would even be allowed access to. However, when you look at all of the esoteric traditions throughout all of the different religions, you'll find that they actually say the same thing. And what the message actually is, I'll be revealing towards the end of this session. However, it's important to note that Freemasonry is not linked, as I've mentioned before, to any particular religion. It is, in many ways, very secular, and uses the symbols of the building trade and stonecraft in order to teach its lessons. You may have heard that Freemasonry consists of 33 degrees, but in actual fact, the main core of Freemasonry consists of only 3. The 33 degrees that you've heard of are actually created so that they can expand on the lessons that are actually conveyed in the initial 3 degrees. So, what are the essential lessons of these initial 3 degrees of Freemasonry? The first degree, or the entered apprentice degree, is where the candidate is first introduced to Freemasonry. He is represented by the rough ashlar. This rough ashlar has been plucked from the quarry and is ready to be worked on by the tools of Freemasonry. This, therefore, is highly symbolic because it is the very start of a Mason's journey. He begins like this and he ends up like this, a perfectly hewn block of stone, ready to go into a building. The individual begins then to chip away the rough parts of his form in a metaphorical way, and he discovers more of himself. He begins conscientiously to live a more ethical life and to educate himself more about the general world as well as Freemasonry itself. Then we move on to the second degree, also known as the Fellowcrafts. This degree is really about constantly measuring yourself. We all need some kind of standard to measure up to. By being self-aware, we can really tell how far we have come and how far we need to go in order to get to that more perfect ashlar. Following on from the metaphor of the statue, the sculptor might stand back on occasion to see how his work is progressing. He might even look at the drawings or plans to see if what's standing in front of him is looking anything like what he has on the sheet of paper. Whilst occasionally stopping to see how we are doing, we can continually chip and work away at ourselves to move ourselves forward. The third degree, or the Master Mason, really expands the context of Freemasonry. No longer is it just about the stone, the perfect ashlar, but it's more about where this perfect ashlar is going to be placed. In this degree, the candidate learns about his relationship with others and learns his place in the same way that a builder will learn the place of an individual block. As we know, individual blocks don't work on their own. They work in conjunction with every other part of the building so that it can stand tall for many generations. In the same way, the candidate is led to a contemplation of how they can best work with other members of society in order to make the world a better place. Therefore, in Freemasonry, society itself can be seen to be represented by a completed building. So what we have is a tradition that enables us to chip away to find the form that is within. But what is the self? I go into some detail about this within the book A Journey in Stone. However, what we think of ourselves in terms of a self might not actually exist. We tend to think of ourselves as a sovereign, separate self that is completely apart from everything else. However, in order to illustrate how connected we really are in the world, I want you to imagine if you were to completely be taken out of history. You never existed. You were never born. I want you to consider that for a moment. What would there need to be in order for that to take place? Let's say that your parents never met. Your mother never gave birth to you. Why would that happen? We now need to look at their choices. Why would they have made those separate choices? It was probably because the world was ever so slightly different. They didn't make the choice to come together and therefore produce you. So why are those circumstances different? Well, all of the elements of their world was different because something that happened before. And we can trace this back all the way through to the beginning of human history. We could even trace this all the way back to the evolution of life on Earth. In fact, this goes all the way back to the beginning of the universe at the Big Bang. Everything has its antecedent cause going all the way back. Now we're at the Big Bang, we can see that the whole of the universe began with particular set preconditions that created a universe eventually in which you do not exist. But remember, the theory goes that the Big Bang started in one place. Everything started in one place. So the very fact that you are not here, from the point when that Big Bang explodes, everything that starts off with the same preconditions in this one place, everything, even stuff across the universe, is completely different. Everything is moving differently, simply because you do not exist. However, we live in a universe where, thankfully, you do exist. Your parents did come together. Your mother did give birth to you. Trace this back. The beginning of the universe had very, very slightly different beginning conditions, which ultimately would lead to you. But again, because everything exploded from the same point, everything in the universe was affected by these initial conditions. Therefore, the very fact that you are here at all affects everything else in the universe, and everything is connected. And it doesn't mean, it's not just restricted to just you. If you were to look at a blade of grass and in your mind erase it from history, everything that brought that blade of grass into existence needs to change, and this goes all the way back to the Big Bang. So don't think of yourself as a separate self, as something that is uniquely different from everything else and is in no way connected. Because in actual fact, everything in the universe is connected. If you change one thing, everything changes. If you look at quantum mechanics, the Pauli exclusion principle, it's right there. There is no self, as you might think of it, in the sense of a separate self. So let's move on to that golden thread that I mentioned earlier, that passes through every initiatic tradition in the world and through ancient times and every esoteric spiritual belief system. In the symbolic story of Freemasonry, the building that is being constructed is King Solomon's Temple. Why do we use this? Well, it's important to remember that the Hebrews of the Bible believed that King Solomon's Temple was the actual abode of deity, of God himself, in the form of the Ark of the Covenant. Literally, the divine spark was contained within a building. But then, there is something else to consider. King Solomon's Temple itself has a double meaning. Not only can it be made to represent society, it is also meant to represent the individual human being themselves. In fact, a Masonic lodge is a representation of King Solomon's Temple. Every Mason meets within this representation. And the offices that are within a lodge room, the 7 main offices, starting with the tiler outside the door to the master who sits in the chair behind me, represent psychological forces of the mind. So Freemasonry is a journey within. It's a journey through a human mind. And it's a delving deeper and deeper to a point where we can understand what truly lies at the centre of our being. Putting this all together, what this means is that golden thread, which threads its way through all initiatic and esoteric traditions, what it is telling us is that we are all connected to something greater, something deep within us that is also connected to everything else. And if we are to dig down and find that, then we can find our true purpose in life, and we can act from that place. And in many ways, this could be considered a spiritual aspect that derives from Freemasonry. Although remember that it is not a religion. There is no dogma. This individual journey is one that a Mason takes alone and may never even touch on that spiritual aspect. However, the symbols, when you look at the language and when you look at the story that is being told, this message is something that becomes very, very clear. So in conclusion then, what we have in Freemasonry is a developmental tool. With its tools and techniques, we can craft our lives and shape them into something that we want them to be. We can find out who we truly are and how we can really contribute to the world around us. It can also provide us with a deep sense of connectedness and a way that we can express this in the living of our daily lives. And just some final words. I want to let you know the sort of things that I'm going to be doing in the future. Firstly, everything that I've said today, I go into far more detail in A Journey in Stone. There is a link on the Facebook page on which you found this video, on which you can purchase it. Also, planned for next month, I'll be broadcasting an interview. And I'd like to invite you to send in any questions that you have to the Facebook page or to the site that I'll mention later on, so that you can have those questions answered, basically. What I'll do is I'll pick a selection of those questions and attempt to answer them. Also, drop me an email or leave me a comment on the Facebook page and I'll get back to you. So with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this session and I'll see you soon.